You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 23rd of May 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, coming to you live from Studio 1 here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Muller. Coming up on today's programme.
This deal with Iran could end in two ways. It could end in a very positive diplomatic solution, or it could end in a very negative situation for Iran.
Yet another round of talks hoping to persuade Iran towards a revived deal over its nuclear ambitions. Later in the show, we'll assess the impact of Germany's first permanent foreign military deployment since World War II. We'll hear about fresh difficulties for Hong Kong's remaining independent media. We'll check in with the Portuguese market occurring this weekend at Monocle's Zurich headquarters. And
hello, Andrew. Tomorrow, Brazil could win its second Palme d'Or in Cannes. We'll discuss the amazing year for Brazilian cinema.
More from Fernando Augusto Pacheco towards the end of the show. That's all coming up right here on The Briefing on Monocle Radio. And welcome to today's edition of The Briefing with me, Andrew Muller. Representatives of Iran and the United States will meet in Rome today for a fifth round of talks aimed at arriving at a new deal governing Iran's nuclear program. It is 7 years since the US, during President Donald Trump's first term, flounced from a previous agreement to which Trump appeared to bear animus related to the fact that it was negotiated by his predecessor, Barack Obama. The dynamics have not changed over much. Iran insists that it does not want a nuclear bomb, and nobody else entirely believes them. The sticking point appears to be the degree to which Iran can enrich uranium for peaceful purposes. Well, I'm joined with more on this by Burcu Özçelik, a senior research fellow for Middle East security at the Royal United Services Institute. Burcu, on the subject of enrichment, which does appear to be the key issue, how far apart are they?
I think there is still a significant divergence in views. Iran has made it very clear that the red line is the no enrichment request that has been sort of suggested by the United States, the negotiating team. The US has been sending mixed messages on this point, on how serious or committed they are to the zero enrichment requirement for the deal to succeed. Of course, Iran has said that that is a no-go. The Supreme Leader underlined this point, the position, earlier this week, and said that it was absolutely ridiculous to impose that kind of external requirement on any sovereign state, and Iran would not accept it.
Would zero enrichment, to be clear, mean an effective end to Iran's civilian nuclear program as well?
Yes, it would, in the way that Iran conceives their civilian nuclear program would need to be run. They could, of course, purchase fuel to run civilian purpose nuclear plants, but that is not an option that the Iranian regime seems to want to agree or be prepared to agree to. There's been significant research, development, investment at a time over years when Iran's economy has been crippled by US and Western sanctions. The allocation of resources and investment into the nuclear program means that, of course, there is a reluctance to walk away from this completely. So there's that aspect of it being sort of the financial component, we could call it. There's also, of course, the prestige, the status aspect of abandoning its civilian nuclear program, as Iran describes it, as a regional actor, as a sovereign state. And Iran just doesn't seem to be willing to even negotiate on that. I think importantly as well that against the backdrop of the possibility of an Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, Iran has said, I believe yesterday, that threatened that they may move enriched stockpiles of uranium to undeclared sites elsewhere in Iran, making it almost impossible for international observers to then verify the progress and pace of the nuclear program.
I mean, how much of a negotiating hand does Iran have at this point, though? I mean, the economy is struggling under sanctions, as indeed it has for years. They are vastly less influential across the Middle East than they were this time a year ago, following the removal of Assad, the destruction of Hamas, and the decapitation of Hezbollah. What do they actually bring to the table?
So the idea there, and that's a very good point, is that Iran is at its weakest point since the 1979 revolution for the various reasons that you outlined. And so the thinking there, I think from the US point of view, is that Iran will be ready to make certain concessions, compromises, and that they wouldn't have previously. But at the same time, if you buy into that argument that Iran is weaker than it's ever been, why would it abandon its last remaining deterrence factor? That is the threat that it could escalate its nuclear program into a bomb in the future. So it's very much about deterrence and Iran's desire to hold on to that at a moment of historical weakness.
I mean, there are carrots being proffered to the Iranians as well as the big stick of American and/or Israeli military action against them. And that is the prospect that Iran's economy could be opened back up to the world, that there could be enormous amounts of investment coming in, and that Iran could be the flourishing, prosperous country which it absolutely could be. But do we know how unmixed or otherwise the Ayatollah's feelings are about that? Because an opened up Iran, a more prosperous Iran, might lead to actual Iranians saying we'd rather not live like this.
Yes, exactly. And that demand for political change, for opening up of the system of political reform and liberalization, there's a very strong push for that at the domestic level in Iran. And we've seen this manifest itself over the years in outpourings of civilian protests against the regime. So from the Ayatollah's perspective, it could be a slippery slope. You make one concession here and the economy begins to recover. Alternative visions for the future of the state begin to gain momentum and prominence, and his position and his grip over the country since 1979 slips. He personally, many times during his long career as Ayatollah of Iran, has said that zero enrichment is an absolute red line. I think he said something along the lines of, he would have to be dead for that to happen. There's no way that he would agree to zero enrichment, again, underlying the prestige, the status component. Iran is a sovereign state operating in the international system.
Burcu Özçelik at the Royal United Services Institute, thank you as always for joining us. You are listening to The Briefing. Here is Chris Chermak with the day's other headlines.
Thanks, Andrew. China has said that Donald Trump's ban on Harvard taking international students will tarnish its own image and reputation around the world. The US administration announced a move to ban Harvard's international student enrollment yesterday as the battle between America's oldest and richest Ivy League university and the White House continues. Commercial flights are set to resume between Panama and Venezuela nearly a year after they were suspended after the two countries broke off diplomatic relations. Venezuela pulled its diplomatic representation from Panama last July when Panamanian President José Raúl Mulino refused to recognize Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro's re-election. And dates have been announced for a controversial new Olympic-style competition called the Enhanced Games, which allows athletes to freely take performance-enhancing drugs. The Games are set to take place in Las Vegas in May next year and include investments from Donald Trump Jr. and former CEO of PayPal, Peter Thiel. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chris. You are listening to The Briefing with me, Andrew Muller. For obvious reasons, Germany has been hesitant about sending troops elsewhere in Europe these last 80 years or so, and absolutely reluctant to deploy them long term. Times have changed, however, and so has Germany's attitude to being perceived as a military power. Germany's new Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has been visiting Lithuania to inaugurate Germany's first permanent foreign deployment since World War II. It is is no token gesture. The 45th Panzer Brigade, nearly 5,000 troops and accompanying armour, intended to deter any funny ideas Russia may be incubating about the Baltics. Well, I'm joined with more on this by Monocle's Helsinki correspondent, Burcu Özçelik. Petri, how significant a moment is this, not just for the defence of NATO's eastern flank, but for Germany?
It's hi, Andrew. It's really a pivotal moment because, as you said, this is the biggest deployment by Germany really since the World War II, and it's first permanent military stationing also since that said war. So of course, representing Merz's so-called Zeitenwende politics, that Germany is assuming a more prominent role in the defense of not only of itself but of Europe and of NATO. And I liked what Merz said, and it's very symbolic of how pivotal this is. He said that protecting Vilnius, when he was in Vilnius, he said protecting Vilnius is protecting Berlin. So just sort of symbolizing that new role that Germany is taking on defending NATO and Europe.
Because we did hear something of Merz's own ambitions last week on this front. He spoke to the Bundestag and talked of building Europe's strongest conventional military, as he put it, a title which for Germany may see considerable competition from Poland for one. But do we get a sense here that 80 years after World War II, 80 years in which Germany has, rethought itself to a huge and commendable extent, that it is at last getting over itself and realising that it does have a role to play and it should have a role to play?
Exactly, that's the sense that we're getting. And the good question is then, is that because of internal reasons arising from Germany and German politics and identity, or is it because the global political situation, Trump and the US, namely, necessitated this change that, Europe just has to shoulder a bigger responsibility in the defense of Europe. So that's a question to be asked. If those were, which one of those two reasons was that led to this?
I mean, you are, of course, speaking to us from one of NATO's eastern flanks, i.e. Finland. Is there a sense there that this is going to be the future, that this part of Europe is going to get more and more heavily defended? You did, of course, yourself recently witness NATO drills in the vicinity.
Yes, that's correct, Andrew. I was at the Hedgehog military exercise in Estonia, the biggest military exercise of Estonia's history. And, we've seen similar exercises in Latvia and Lithuania, and in fact, also in Finland. And there's more and more NATO troops being stationed both in Finland, but also in the Baltic states. So there is a sense that NATO is doing more than it ever has, and that the defense of NATO really is shifting to the eastern flank more than before. But then there's also, we've heard voices of criticism, of course, in the past several years from Baltic states and their leaders regarding the, whether or not NATO has committed enough troops. Because, I mean, even with this a very significant deployment by Germany, it essentially brings the total number of NATO troops in the Baltic states to about 8,000 troops, which, at the 2022 Madrid summit, NATO pledged to, instead of the so-called tripwire approach, where the enemy invades and then NATO sends reinforcements to take territory back. Instead, NATO is committed to defending every inch of the territory. But will 8,000 troops, even with this German deployment, will it be enough? Given that I believe the latest estimates put the Russian troops in Ukraine close to almost 1 million, or at least 800,000 or 900,000. So you just looking at the numbers. The question is, will that be enough?
Well, some of those 8,000 troops who have lately been in the Baltics are, of course, American. There's been 2 battalions from 1st Brigade, the 3rd Infantry Division, lately rotating in Lithuania, as we were reminded when 4 were recently killed in a training accident. Do you perceive that amid all this European activity, there is an amount of insulation for the possibility that the United States, at some point during the remainder of Trump's term, might actually walk away from its commitments to defend Europe?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we don't hear that so much in the I interviewed some of the top-ranking generals at the military exercise in Estonia. But when you speak to the actual, run-of-the-mill soldiers in taking part in the exercise, that is the biggest question on their lips. That will the Americans be there for us in the future?
And just finally, Petri, to bring it back to Germany, which is where we came in, do we have any idea of where German public opinion is on this? When Merz's predecessor, Olaf Scholz, first spoke about how, basically, yes, the times have changed and we must change with them, the Zeitenwende speech, as he put it. Polling at the time suggested that there was actually quite substantial German support for the idea of becoming a proper, normal military power again. 3 years later, is that holding up?
Well, Andrew, I haven't seen any polling that's been carried out since this announcement, but indeed that has been the sense up until now. That also because of generations have passed since World War II, that Germany is willing to take on a bigger role. And then regarding public opinion, speaking as a Finn, and speaking of sort of how my nation reacted to Russians' full-scale invasion of Ukraine, public opinion completely turned around. Most Finns, a great majority of Finns, were opposed to NATO before, and then something like over 80% all of a sudden became pro-NATO. So public opinion also shifts very rapidly when the surrounding political landscape changes.
Petri Burtsoff in Helsinki, thanks for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You are back with The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Since November 2023, Hong Kong's Inland Revenue Department has launched tax audits against at least 6 independent media outlets, including Hong Kong Free Press, demanding over 1.7 million Hong Kong dollars, often without very much in the way of evidence. The Hong Kong Journalists Association says indeed that these audits lack sufficient evidence, while authorities maintain that they follow established procedures and that industry background does not influence selections. Well, I'm joined with more on this by Tom Grundy, the editor-in-chief and co-founder of Hong Kong Free Press. Tom, can you tell us exactly what has happened with Hong Kong Free Press lately?
Well, pretty much the entire independent news sector is under scrutiny. Top editors, sometimes their spouses, their parents, freelance reporters, 20 people in all are also seeing in these inspections that span 6 or 7 years. We have not been immune to this. It often involves backdated demands, as you've said, and the union, has said that these are quite arbitrary amounts, and there's even sometimes errors in referencing non-existent business numbers and things like that. I mean, all of us as companies are pretty small fish, and the cost of doing this likely exceeds what they could probably get out of everybody. But certainly in our case, we have always paid tax in full and on time, if only because I kind of guess this thing might have happened. And Inland Revenue, as this has all come to light this week, have said that, they follow the normal rules and procedures, and the background of the industry have no bearing on these reviews.
The authorities also claim that those targeted for auditing are selected entirely randomly. Is it fair to say that there is an amount of scepticism over that claim?
That would be fair, yeah. It's a good question. I mean, in 2023 to 24, there were 1,802 tax audits processed by Inland Revenue. Now, in the same year, there are 1.46 million companies in Hong Kong. So I calculate roughly the chances of getting inspected to be 0.12%. If you add that to the fact that we were also inspected randomly by the company's registry to check on all of our paperwork, they knocked the door last year, your chances of being inspected by 2 government departments in 18 months are even lower, let alone adding to the statistics the fact that coincidentally, simultaneously, over 6 other outlets are being inspected at the same time. So, I'll let your listeners decide as to whether there may be something else behind that. But of course, Inland Revenue say that this is all normal procedure.
Well, for your outlet in particular, the Hong Kong Free Press, how do you respond to this? What do you do?
Well, like I say, we've always paid in full, so we've been cooperating in full. We are in our fourth year of deficit. I have probably better things to do, but we've enlisted tax lawyers and our accountant and auditors to battle through it. And I think we're almost through it, to be honest. But it is the fourth government department in 18 months that has been on our backs, owing to what I reckon to be false complaints last year. The license for my dog was inspected by the authorities, and we were selling some fundraising hot sauce, and there were also some inspections over the license for the factory. But multiple journalists and press freedom groups have criticised already what's been going on here, and certainly I've become a one-man compliance department in what is meant to be the freest economy in the world, famed for its laissez-faire, freewheeling, economy. But I feel like I'm having to act as if we're a huge conglomerate or something in terms of ensuring, our insurance, our pensions, our certificates are on the wall and all of this, because one doesn't know what government department might be giving a knock tomorrow.
Just finally then, is that the fear must be among Hong Kong media that this just won't stop, that this is a concerted program of official harassment intended to make being an independent media outlet just completely intolerable?
Well, when we talk about places going under a democratic backsliding, I don't know if people perceive that to be everything going into some sort of Soviet grayscale and goose-stepping and all these kinds of things. Actually, it's often more mundane with this kind of bureaucratic and administrative scrutiny. And certainly it takes time, energy, effort, resources, at a small outlet like ours to battle through. I don't know if that's part of the reason, or whether they're looking to, surveil or see your funding or things like that. But certainly we've been obfuscating in our paper submissions all of our donor names anyway. But, this comes in the backdrop of journalists jailed, newsrooms raided, and multiple press freedom indices showing Hong Kong tumbling. But, for now, for us, we will keep calm and carry on. And we believe it's still better to be in than out.
Tom Grundy at Hong Kong Free Press, thanks for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You're back with The Briefing, and next we meet Max Graham, the founder of Barduro, a London restaurant bringing authentic Portuguese food and wine to the UK. From salt cod and smoked sausage to volcanic wines from the Azores, he joined Carlota Rebello at Monocle Spring Market with Visit Portugal on the 10th of May to tell us how his heritage inspired 2 restaurants and a growing wine business. Carlota began by asking him about the story behind Barduro.
I grew up in Portugal. My family have made wine there for almost 200 years, and I've always been very familiar with the north of Portugal, particularly the Minho, the Douro, Porto, Bairrada regions, even the Down. And in 2016, I decided to open Barduro following a pop-up a few years earlier in Soho. It was during that time of the pop-up that I was really exposed to London's restaurant scene. And so, we opened Barduro London Bridge under a railway arch in 2016 in London Bridge. And we've got another restaurant that we opened in 2020 in the city. And both restaurants serve very typical Portuguese food. It's elevated for a London audience in terms of its presentation, but in terms of flavors, we try and stay as true to the origins of a dish.
Listeners might be able to pick up on the sound behind us, and that's the sound of frying from Barduro, and this is the, fried milho frito, fried polenta, if we want to use the Italian equivalent,
or
the cornmeal.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, I'm very happy about this dish because it's traditional from my island, from Madeira, and it's so rare to see it in Portuguese restaurants here in London. But do you have a favorite dish from Barduro? What is your comfort food?
For me, it has to be the bacalhau à Brás. It's never left our menu. It's a dish that I loved when I was a child. It's so comforting. It just sums up when it's done right. It's got incredible texture. It should have that sort of silky, creamy egg yolk with that crunchy potato, and then lovely sort of flakes of bacalhau, salt cod, and caramelized onion to just give it a little bit of sweetness. But it's kind of a bit like a kedgeree in England, but it's just comfort food, and it's something that, you know, it's really the acid test of our restaurant. Whenever we go in there, whenever we hire new chefs, it's our signature, and we love that dish. But not to say milho frito is also incredible. For us at Barduru, it's all about exploring. It's all about taking our customers on a journey through Portugal. We love to talk about different regions. We love to spotlight the dishes and the ingredients that come from those regions. We're also serving croquetes de alheira. Alheira is a wonderful smoked sausage from the Trás-os-Montes. This one comes from Montalegre, but, you know, they're also very well known from Chaves. And I mean, it's a beautiful story of Alheira. Alheira was there was a Jewish community living in the Trás-os-Montes in this area during the time of the Inquisition. And in order for them to avoid being persecuted by the Catholic Church and Christians, they basically created these sausages using everything that wasn't pork. And they'd make these sausages and hang them from their windows, and then all the local Christians thought that they were also Christians. It's those ingredients and those sort of dishes that we really want to champion.
Well, and part of your mission to, you know, bring a bit more of Portugal to London, to the UK, to increase the presence, then there's also Festa, which we mentioned at the start. Now, this is started as a one-off festival, essentially a celebration of Portugal, that now has turned into a fully fledged business, wine importers. Maybe let's start with the Festa that launched Festa as a brand.
Yeah, absolutely. So just after everyone had been in lockdown, I really wanted to put something on that would bring the Portuguese community in London together. And like you said, just a pure celebration of Portugal. We had 55 winemakers from Portugal, all small growers from remote regions, and then some more well-known pioneers like Luís Pato or Quinta das Bageiras. We had pop-up restaurants, we had a market full of Portuguese brands, and we had Portuguese live music. It was wonderful, and it did what we wanted it to do. And it lived on, exactly as you said, it lives on as a wine import business. We work with 20 small producers from every single region in Portugal. And we import their wines and we sell to the trade, we sell online through our shop, and then we also sell those wines at Barduru. And in just the same way as with our food at Barduru, you know, with our wines, it's all about showing the character, what makes these wines uniquely Portuguese. You know, is it the great varieties that we're championing, of which there are over 250 in Portugal? Is it the regions? You know, I mentioned diversity. Portugal, if you go north to south, you go through so many different types of landscapes, from the wild Atlantic to the mountains of the Down and Trás-os-Montes, or even Porto Alegre in Alentejo, right down to the sort of, you know, the sunny plains of Alentejo and to the Algarve, or across to Madeira and the Azores. We're actually serving a wonderful volcanic white efusivo from Entre Pedras from the Azores.
Is it the one from Pico?
From Pico,
yeah, I think
exactly.
I tried it earlier. It's amazing.
Yeah,
it's so crisp.
Crisp, salty, it's got that sort of real mineral, you can almost smell the volcano in the wine. It's wonderful, and that's what, particularly with Festa, it's about sharing the stories of the places and the faces behind these wines.
That was Monocle's Carlotta Rebello speaking to Max Graham, the founder and director of Barduru and Festa. And if you are going to be in Zurich this weekend, do stop by our annual Bardi Market in collaboration with Visit Portugal to explore some of the best brands Portugal has to offer. We're there all day at our Zurich headquarters at Duferstrasse 90. You are listening to The Globalist on Monocle Radio. This is The Briefing on Monocle Radio, and finally on today's show, Brazilian cinema is enjoying something of a boom and may be on the verge of a further significant boost from the Cannes Film Festival. Well, I'm joined with more on this by Monocle's senior correspondent, Fernando Augusto Pacheco, who is inevitably extremely excited about this. Fernando, even before what may be about to descend from Cannes, this has been quite a year for Brazilian cinema.
Quite a year indeed. I mean, I've been here on radio talking about I'm Still Here, which is the amazing film by Walter Salles featuring Fernanda Torres about an activist, Eunice Paiva, during the military dictatorship. This film, first of all, Andrew, not only won the Oscar for Best International Feature, the very first for Brazil, but was a box office hit in Brazil, my country. And it's quite surprising because, it is a drama. It's over 2 hours long. It's quite a dense film in a way. It's not your kind of chirpy blockbuster. But the numbers were incredible. And even Fernanda Torres herself was nominated for Best Actress, which, let's be honest, is quite hard for a non-English film as well.
It's also been, or it's about to be, a box office smash possibly in China.
Yes, and that was part of when Xi Jinping met Lula just a few weeks ago. One of the topics was Brazilian cinema. So they organized that I'm Still Here was going to be released in China in over 10,000 screens in the country. And China is a massive kind of market for film. And they're releasing less and less foreign films. So that was quite a catch for Lula. So even in China, I'm Still Here is doing well. So this is remarkable. Probably the first time that a Brazilian film has been consumed by so many different nations as well.
Well, let's look at the reason, Fernando, that the fingers of one of your hands are crossed and the other one is clutching a lucky rabbit's foot. This is Brazil's entry at Cannes. Is it in with a serious shot at the big prize?
It is indeed. If you trust the critics and the experts, it could win Brazil's second Palme d'Or. Last time we won was in 1962. And just a curiosity here, if you are a bit of a film nerd, Fernanda Torres, who was on I'm Still Here, won Best Actress in Cannes in 86. But nevertheless, it will be an amazing moment. We got the Oscar earlier this year. To get the Palme d'Or will be remarkable. And you know what? It's Kleber Mendonça Filho. He's a fantastic director. And although the film in question, The Secret Agent, is also set in the final years of the military dictatorship, the film has a different tone. I haven't seen the film because it's not out yet, but apparently there's moments of comedy. It's kind of a little bit more lurid. I think I'm Still Here was kind of a slightly more conventional drama. So yeah, dictatorship is important, but you can do it in different ways as well.
Is this something that's only started to happen relatively recently, that there's been more cultural responses to that period of dictatorship? Because it is a part of Brazil's recent history which is still kind of an awkward one for a lot of people.
We had films before, but not important films in the sense that is reaching the audiences they want. I've always spoke before, I think countries like Chile and Argentina, they dealt with the dictatorship even culturally, perhaps a little bit better than Brazil. And maybe this is our moment to do that. I think it's quite a coincidence that The Secret Agent is also about that. And Kleber Mendonça Filho is a critic of Bolsonaro, and during the Bolsonaro years, there was a lack of investment in the cinema industry. But things are definitely changing.
Well, just finally then, we may have listeners, Fernando, who wish to clamber aboard the Brazilian cinema bandwagon. Give them a couple of recommendations.
I have 2 recommendations, and they're non-dictatorship related. The first one, actually, is Motel Destino. That's an interesting one. It's a sweaty, erotic noir thriller. It's set in a motel full of neon, and a lot of mysterious things happen there. That's all I can say. I've seen the film. It's out here in London, actually, at the moment. Excellent. The other one is out in Brazil. It's called Homem com H, or Man with an H, or something like that, translating. It's a biopic of Ney Matogrosso, which is a Brazilian music legend, but he was a revolutionary at the time in the 70s, the way he dressed. I mean, you love perhaps his dress sense, Andrew, but he was really like a trailblazer. And for a change, it's a biopic that is actually good.
Fernando Augusto Pacheco, Monocle's senior correspondent, thanks for joining us. That is all for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Hassan Anderson, our researcher was Francesca Jokes, and our studio manager was Mariella Bevan. The Briefing returns on Monday at the same time, midday London. I'm Andrew Muller. Thanks for listening.